We're in a series called This Is Us, where we're looking just at what makes us as a church. I'm not going to be long today, largely because I didn't get a lot of time this week to prep a really vast message, but God kind of blindsided me this morning with another portion of Scripture that I wasn't anticipating using, but makes sense now in the scheme of the journey we've been on today. So if you've got your Scriptures, open them to Matthew. Look at Matthew chapter 7, and it will come on the screen. And the context of this moment that Jesus is speaking is a Sermon on the Mount. It's the moment where Jesus is really preaching the kingdom manifesto. He's saying that this is what it means. This is what it means to be in the kingdom. This is what it means, and talks about marriage, talks about love, talks about prayer, talks about fasting, talks about judgment, talks about revenge, talks about hate, talks about enemies. Very practical message that Jesus speaks. And then we get to this interesting moment where we read this. Jesus kind of concludes the back end of his message and says, "Anyone who listens to my teachings and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on a solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock." It's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus, after preaching a very compelling message, now kind of concludes this message with a sense of saying, listen, if you listen to what I'm saying, and if you embed into the core of your life what I'm saying, he doesn't say if the rains come, he says though the rains come, as in, there's always going to be moments of significant testing in your life. Testing that comes in the form of many things. Here, the metaphor is a storm. But this idea that the elements are going to be absolutely like bashing at the door. There's going to be moments in your life where you feel like under fire from every angle. There's going to be moments in your life where you feel like the rug's been pulled from underneath you. There's going to be moments in your life where you feel potentially overwhelmed by what life is throwing you, almost like God has been unjust in this testing. Yet Jesus says, he says, the rain comes. And we sung that this morning, didn't we? Rains, what is it? Rain comes, winds blow. I can't remember what the words are, but something to that extent. I'm not a poet, as you can tell. He says, if winds beat against that house, it won't collapse. It won't collapse. In other words, there's the potential for you to be overwhelmed. Listen to this. But if you build your life on Christ, not overcome. That's cool, isn't it? Sometimes people reduce the good news and the gospel message to this idea of one day, I don't have to go to hell. That's why I like church. That's why I like being a Christian. Yay, I get to go to heaven. Now, obviously, I'm playing it down. That's amazing. That's brilliant. But there's a whole other level that when we understand that this Christian message, this good news, actually impacts my life today. Like, this isn't some future thing I'm just kind of hoping out for, but rather if I truly take the teachings of Jesus and not just hear them, but act upon them, if I live according to the precepts of God, then when the winds come and the rain comes and the floodwaters rise, I may feel a sense of being overwhelmed, but by the grace of God, I won't be overcome. Now, I need you to hear that. I want all of you to hear that today. Because if there is a sense in your life that you are feeling overcome, if there is a sense in your life like you are literally drowning under the pressures, the tensions, the traumas, the experiences that life has brought you, then I believe that maybe you haven't understood what Jesus is saying in this moment. You may have built your house, to use another passage in 1 Corinthians 3, as Paul says, with more cheap kind of things. Wood, hay, straw. And in that passage, Paul says testing will come. in the form of a fire. And basically, wood, hay, and straw, what does it do? Burns up. But when you build your house, when you build your life with costly stone, then actually not only does it withstand the pressures of testing, it gets more refined. Nothing like a fridge just cutting through a moment, is there? I love it. Praise God for fridges. Jesus says, but anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike their teachers of religious law. There was a breath of fresh air in Jesus' teaching for sure that just challenged the kind of the whole idea of teaching, that teaching wasn't just something you listened to and was impressed by, but teaching that would actually change your life if you allow it. I was thinking about this, that if you look at the screen, over the last few weeks in this series, I've been trying to just lay a bit of groundwork for who we are as a church. And week one, after New Year, we looked at this idea of the things we believe and why that's paramount to us as a church. And it's almost like this foundational stone that is crucial for what we build on top of that. Like I used the picture of a car in week one, but now I'm kind of moving to a different kind of picture just to try and help support my thinking. But we spoke about those areas of doctrine, in other words, teachings of the scriptures that speak to us about who God is and who we are and our purpose, okay? And those doctrines, those teachings become key to us building a healthy church. Crucially key. Sometimes people get unexcited and a bit kind of, doctrine, yeah, whatever. But the truth is that the things we believe become the plumb line of our faith. That actually you can see many churches falling away from the truth of God because what they're trying to do is appeal to a culture that is lost. So they surrender their historic, 2 millennia held orthodox views in order to try and draw a crowd. And the problem is as they draw a crowd, they're drawing a crowd to a house that is built on sand. A house that is mid-collapse. So it may look good on the outside. In fact, sometimes I wander down that beach, Millionaires Row in Sandbanks. And for a moment, I'm jealous of the owners of those houses who, buy a nice little bungalow and then bulldoze it and then build like this 8-story Iron Man mansion, like at Sandbanks. You know which ones I'm talking about, right? And I'm thinking I'm jealous, but I think, would I be jealous if a tsunami came? And then would I be quite happy to live in Wallace Down at that point, on a hill, looking at the suckers who built the house on sand, banks, literally. Oh, Paul, you guys. The last 10 years were great, though, weren't they? But enjoy the weather tomorrow. No, obviously, I'm not wishing that on anyone. But, there can be a sense that we build something that looks great, but if it's not undergirded, if it's not built on the rock, then it is so vulnerable to the elements of life. And so as a church, we have to be passionate about holding to our doctrine. Paul says to the young pastor Timothy, watch your doctrine closely. He says, because this is the thing that will save you, and it will also save your hearers. If we get the doctrine bit wrong, any message we convey, any people that we lead to Christ, is going to be building their life on a false foundation. So doctrine is crucial. The other aspect that we build on top of our beliefs is our vision. In light of our beliefs, where do we think God is calling us to go? And then a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that as a church, we're here for the one. That is our core belief. Primarily, we believe that we exist for people who don't know Jesus yet. And it has been the joy of a lifetime to see people get saved in recent times. I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. Baptizing 10 people, before Christmas. I don't think we've ever done a December baptism before. I was loving that, 10 people. And then just a few weeks later to need another baptism service again. Next Sunday night, we've got 4 people getting baptized who, amazing, isn't it? So good. Not people who were raised as Christians, but people who weren't raised as Christians, who have found Christ. There is something happening. I'm not trying to enjoy that the world is in chaos. But let me tell you, there's something appealing about an unshakable kingdom when everything else is falling apart. And so our vision is that we are a church here for the one who doesn't know Jesus yet. And then on top of our vision, in light of our vision, we establish certain values. Values that determine the behaviors that we want to see expressed and lived out in the life of the fellowship. That's really important. I think sometimes we don't join the dots here. We don't recognize that if your life is going in a direction you don't like, then it's probably most likely that your values are rubbish. No offense. And then on top of that line, we have our culture. Picture it like an iceberg. You see an iceberg and it looks impressive on the water. Imagine the iceberg it's depressing, but that took down the Titanic, right? I don't know. Now that iceberg, obviously, quite sizable. What was more impressive about the iceberg was the stuff that nobody saw, right? The fact that iceberg was probably 2/3, maybe even more than that, bigger underneath the water level. I think it's kind of impressive that all of these things underneath the surface that people may not see impact the stuff that we're building with above the surface that everyone sees and feels. I'm going to be talking about culture more next week, but you remember on week 1 I said that to a non-Christian coming to church, the thing that they're going to encounter first is the culture. Yeah? I'm not losing you, am I? They don't come to church and go, I just really love your view on the Trinity. But you're not a Christian. Yeah, but I'm just really looking for a church that really believes in the Trinity. That doesn't happen. Or I just really love your vision of leading people to Jesus. Yeah, but you're not a Christian. Yeah, but there's just something about the vision I like. No, it's not that. It's like when I came to church, was I welcomed? In light of our values, was there a people that were expressing behaviors that drew me in to the deeper things of God? So like we were saying on week 1, that for a seasoned believer, let's say you've recently moved to this church, maybe you moved to the area and come to church, you've been walking with Jesus for the last 15 years, actually the priority for you is, what does this church actually believe? And then after that, well, where is this church going? And then third of that, well, what are the things they value? And then on top of that, what is the culture? But if you're a non-Christian, the flow is the other way. This idea that how does it feel when I'm there? And sometimes we have this habit of making that a superficial component of church, but it's crucially important to the mission. I'm going to show you why this morning. So, in Acts 2, we see this moment where thousands of people get saved at Pentecost. And 3,000 to be precise. It's a seismic shift in the landscape of the church, because up until this moment, you could count the church in 3 digits. You could go, okay, there's about 120 believers, okay, who are proactively following Jesus. But after this day, there are over 3,000 believers. People who got saved from all over the region, speaking different languages, all got saved. All come with their unique experience, all came with their unique outlook and their unique quirks and their unique personalities. All came into this moment that God had ordained, and Peter preached the gospel, and 3,000 responded. The welcome team was overwhelmed by the influx of new Christians. The apostles were like, we're going to need more small groups. How's the kids' work looking? Is it just Louise out there with a ghetto blaster? What's going on out there? It presents a whole heap of questions, but what's amazing is at the get-go of this miraculous moment of mass conversion, what we see in verse 42 is all the believers, so all of them, right, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, a.k.a. communion, and to prayer. Now, as a leader, I find that amazing. The reason I find that amazing, because trying to lead 3 children to kind of do what I want them to do is challenging. Any parents relate to that? Okay, you got a couple. The rest of you are absolute liars. Liars! It's hard work. Kids have free will. They've got their own thinking about life. They've got their own dreams and desires. And from a very early age, like they know what they're about. Even this morning, it was amazing. William, what a legend. Youngest volunteer at Sunny Hill, I reckon. Simon and Becca's boy. Absolute beautiful boy. Oh, yeah, give him a round of applause. He's great. And he comes with his dad, ready to offload the trailer at like 8 a.m. in his little Bournemouth hat and all this. So they're indoctrinating him already, okay? And he's ready to go. And I hear him and his dad have an exchange. And he's saying, Dad, I want to push that. And Simon says, no, you can't push that. That's too big for you to push. I want to push it. And I hear Simon say, no, you're not pushing it. We'll take the box off and then you can push the wheels. And then I thought, well, I'll leave that happening. And I come in here and I go out. And the little kid is pushing the box. I was like, legend. I said, can you manage that? And he said, yeah. He said, I put on my big muscles last night. I was like, awesome. Let's go. But like dealing with kids, they're free will agents in the same way. Like sometimes leading church, to be honest, always leading church is hard work. It's hard graft. Me and Louise were just talking this week. It feels like you're constantly trying to coerce people into doing things they don't want to do. Like sometimes I feel like, am I a pastor or a salesman? What am I? You know, you say we need more workers in kids' church, and like, yeah, you know, we need more setup team, or we need more trailer tires. Now, I sound like I'm ribbing you out, and I probably am a little bit. You guys are amazing mostly. But it kind of sometimes feels just like we were reflecting at SLT this Friday, just like, you know, are we just like mass manipulators? What's the deal here? Like, are we just literally like constantly trying to like move people into a posture that isn't natural? Like, can you do this? I don't really want to. Yeah, but, you know, people won't get saved unless you do it. So do it! Like, feels like sometimes, and like this is a church, I don't know, let's say 200-300 people, right? And it's a challenge trying to get us all on the same page. It's a challenge trying to convince you that, like, let's do this. Like, bring your friends to Mark Ritchie. Come to summer camp, invest in community, join a small group, lead a small group. Like, let's get serious about mission. Let's do this together. Let's serve together. This is so much fun. Woohoo! You know? Now imagine 3,000 people getting saved. 3,000 people getting saved. No history of church. No history. In fact, to be honest, sometimes I think new Christians are better than old Christians in this sense. That's my experience. Like, but here we see 3,000 people come into relationship with Jesus, and it says the very next things, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing meals, including communion and to prayer. There were 4 defining values that were absolutely core to the existence of the early church. We see them here. That when someone got saved, they were like, well, this is the shape I adopt. This is the value I embed into my life. I value the apostles' teaching, in other words, New Testament. I value church community. I value sharing meals, including communion. So eating with believers, we need to bring some of that back, don't we? We need to do that more. And I value prayer. And we don't get the impression like it was just a cold coercion. There was a passionate devotion. In the Greek, the word really is about this passionately committed to these 4 values that really set apart the early church community to the world. Like these things were so real in the life of the new believers that like you even read down the bottom, like verse 44. They shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. I mean, isn't that amazing? It's like it can only be a work of the Holy Spirit, can't it? This isn't just effective salesmanship. This is a work of the Spirit of God. People get saved and realize that when I give my life to Christ, I mean I'm giving my life to Christ. When I give my life to Jesus, he's getting the whole thing. Everything I am and everything I have. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity. I'm awful at sharing meals, but this is what they did. With great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. My prayer forever since leading this church was that one day we would live in a reality where there are people getting saved every single day. It's cool, isn't it? Like one day that would be that would be our reality. And I think we're getting closer than ever to this reality. Not because we're putting on events or alpha courses, but because us as missionaries go into the workplace, go into our schools and colleges, and go with a sense of confidence and boldness and proclaim the good news of Jesus and see people respond. The harvest field is ripe and ready. That's what Jesus says. It's ready for the harvest. And I just love this idea that there are 4 values that we see the early church play out. Now, I need to rush on. I've only got a few more moments. And just to make sure I do that, no, actually, don't come up yet, Matthew. There's 2. I was thinking about this in our values. I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but I work with a lot of people and I see a lot of things in myself as well. And I think there are 2 types of values. There are determined values and there are discovered values. So I'm going to start with the first one, determined values. Determined values are values that you hold innately. Everybody in this room has values. We all have values. In other words, things we value. Now, you may not identify what they are. You may not recognize what they are, but you have values present in you as a result of your upbringing, as a result of your personality, as a result of your trauma that you've been through. There are values like that define who you are. And when you meet a person encounters, for better and for worse, the determined values in your life. And often these values are like a mixing pot of crazy. So I was thinking about this, on the one hand, I do, believe it or not, I have a value. Now, you may laugh at this, but I'm going to say it, right? Of fitness, okay? Seriously, guys, you shouldn't laugh, really. No, I have this value of fitness. I like being sporty. I like being agile. Now, obviously, I'm not, okay? And I've got to work on that. Because there's a competing, determined value in my life, which is that I really value food. So I love exercise and actually love the feeling of being fit. But I also love eating very bad food. Yeah, it's like yesterday, I'm just like a bag of walking contradictions. Like yesterday, between 5 and 6, I do a bit of a workout, rip some muscle, do some chest press. Let's go. Yeah, on top of it. By 7:30, I'm eating a Chinese takeaway. It's a bag of contradiction, but there's these determined values in our life, and often we're not, unless we do some deep soul searching, we don't realize what these conflicting values are. Now, there's another set of values, discovered values. Discovered values are these things where we go, well, I know if I want to do this, then I need to value this in my life. In other words, if I want to play football for Sunny Hill, right, I can't just keep eating Chinese takeaway and hope that I make the team. Even if I'm better than Danny, it's irrelevant. Even if I eat all the food in the world and I still outperform him, it's totally irrelevant, okay? What I have to do is, if that's my vision, if my vision is to be a footballer, okay, now I need to discover values that are going to help me achieve that preferred future. Does that make sense? And the truth is, in this moment in the book of Acts, you've got 3,000 people who have determined values. They're all bringing their baggage. They're all bringing their conflicting values, but they're coming in and discovering a set of values that appeals to them more than their determined values that they already possess. And on that note, I just underlined this because this is important. The best thing you can do is identify what your innate values are. Such a healthy thing to do. Not so that you can live according to them, but so that you can decide if they are serving you or enslaving you. I'll say that again because I think that is really important. The best thing you can do is identify what your innate values are. Not so that you can live according to them, but so that you can decide if they are serving you or enslaving you. See, some of you may struggle to move to your preferred future, but it's because you haven't worked backwards and say, what values are embedded in my life that are bringing about this outcome every time? And then take it to the Lord in prayer. I've really done that this year with regards to food. I'm like, Lord, I love the food that you've given us. I love it. but help me to love it less. And help me to love being fit more. Because actually, it's not about just mustering things in my own strength. And I know that seems like maybe a flippant idea, but in the life of the church, this becomes really important. Our household, for example, we noticed early on, and I've shared this before, but, it helps us. Matthew, do you want to come up on keys? Because I do need to land this plane. But when Caleb was about 2-3 years old, I really learned early doors how sin is not a learned behavior. Yeah, some of you kids go, yeah, get it. Like, sin isn't something you pick up along the way. Sin is something that just comes really naturally. I'm brilliant at sinning. I'm going to do it with my eyes closed. I'm so good at it. I remember, this is the whole point of parenting, really. You have to teach your kids to be good, not to be naughty, because naughty is really easy. Naughty is, natural. I remember one occasion where, we had some set rules in our old house. We didn't want to be one of those family that, moves everything to the top shelf and changes everything we like. We won't have anything we like in our house because we've got this crazy little kid growing up in it. We didn't want that. We wanted our child to exist in the house that we wanted to live in. So I didn't want to put Perspex over my TV screen, I didn't want to have to put the rubbish bin on a shelf. I just wanted to build godliness into my child. And so we had 3 or 4 key rules in our house. One was you can't touch the bin, you can't touch the DVD player, you can't touch those lame IKEA paper lights, stupid things, right? You know which ones I mean? It's made with cigarette Rizzler paper and just looks like a fire waiting to happen. And you can't touch the coals on the fireplace, even though they're fake. You're just not touching them. Those are the 4 rules. So don't touch the DVD player, don't touch the coals on the fire, don't touch the bin, and don't touch the stupid IKEA lamp, okay? Don't touch any of it. Now, most of the time, you might get, you test the boundaries, but one day he came in, all that, and he comes in, I kid you not, right? He goes over to the IKEA lamp and rips it. Oh, man, it's making me mad. It's bringing PTSD thinking about it. Rips it, as in yeah, screw that rule, I'm ripping this. Rips it, kicks over the bin, opens the DVD player, and grabs a coal and launches it across the living room. And then, to top it all off, he brings his hand to me, as in, yeah, smack it. Just do it, bring on your best, just do it. Bring it on. I'm ready for this. I was like, you defiant little turd sniffer. It's pretty wild, really, because, we've only ever modeled to him, a sense of, well, I say goodness. Louise better than me. I haven't always succeeded at this, but we've always understood that kind of Proverbs 22 directive to train a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. But this idea that children need training, they need shaping, they need boundaries. It doesn't help them to just go, yeah, you decide what's right and wrong. That's a recipe for disaster. And for any of you approaching parenting in that way, don't do it, please. I mean, this might be like a salesman. Don't do that kind of positive parenting thing where you let them discover the boundaries for themselves. Don't do that. Take that idea, write it down, put it in the fire. It won't serve you. Children need training. They need boundaries. And then they need parents who will consistently remind them of those boundaries. Now, I'm not telling you how to discipline your child, but actually discipline proves a legitimacy. Discipline proves that actually I love you enough to get into a fight about this. It would be easier just to give you an iPad and say, shut up. But I love you enough to do the hard yards, to correct bad behavior that is going to set you up to a life of destruction. Train your children. We learned this, like I say, early on. And so we have devised something that we've done over and over. I've showed you before, and I'll show you again. We have this. This is our fridge, our cluttered fridge. Just put, like I said before, just star of the week, just include that in the picture, that's fine. And values ambassador and reward event, just because our kids are amazing, obviously. But look, there's the vision of our household. We're kind, we're fun, we're one. We love God, His church, and each other. We're a great family, and together anything is possible. That's our vision. That's our destination. That's always been our destination. That's our mantra. That's never changed. And then we've got 5 values that undergird that aspiration. So as a family, we champion good attitude. Good attitude. Let me tell you, naturally, their innate value is bad attitude. Their innate value is to be like sucking lemons. You know, their innate value is to be like responding in a negative way to things that they don't enjoy. Another value that we have is obedience. I love obedience. It's a gift to be able to trust your children to do what you tell them to do. Obedience is a gift, and so we champion that as a family. I champion honesty. I don't want little deceiving brats around my house. I want people I can trust. I want to build honesty. Now, let me tell you, they will make mistakes, and they'll get it wrong, but that's where the training comes. The fourth thing is we want to be a loving household, and we've got a little explanation of all these values beneath the words, and we want to be respectful. So respect doesn't look like punching your brother, ever. Respect never looks like rolling your eyes if your mom tells you to make your bed. Respect never works that way. And so we've done the counter side, as you can see at the bottom. I've got a better picture here. And those are the birds there. You see the bottom? Daddy bird, mommy bird, and then the three little birds trailing in the back. Now, I'm not saying this to say, oh, wow, look how good that family is. That's not the intention. The intention is without this, we'd be screwed. Because we're that bad, naturally. Naturally, me and Louise, we're sinful. We want the easy way out. Naturally, my kids are sinful. They want to push the boundaries and determine their own kind of plans. This is hard work. I'm showing you this not because we're smashing as a family, but because unless we establish what our vision is, unless we establish what things we stand for as a house, then our house is divided. And Jesus says a divided house can't stand. Can't stand. And so to come back to this picture, for the house to stand, it has to be undergirded with godly values, with a vision that is Christ-centric and God-glorifying, and a set of beliefs that set us up for a future of blessing and future of multiplication. I say all this because this isn't a parenting seminar, but we're no different. As a church, we're inclined to do our own things, to push the boundaries, to actually champion gossip and dissension and division because we are naturally sinful. But if we can determine in our hearts, hey, in light of what we believe about Christ and his love for people, we're going to pursue every person who doesn't know Jesus yet. And in order to pursue every person that doesn't know Jesus yet, we're going to embed and establish some values in our life that are going to lead us to that outcome. Does that sound good? Now, I'm going to unpack that more next week, specifically what our values are. But we have a high five value. And we'll unpack that. I don't know what fat hand that is on there. That's not my hand. That's not an animated version of my hand. I mean, maybe it is. I do like food after all, but I don't think it's me. But we'll unpack this more next week. But just to say, there are capital C church values. In other words, things that every church who preach the gospel should value. There should be things about us that is true to St. Mary's or Citygate or Lansdowne. Like, there should be a commonality of values if we are genuinely biblically based and Jesus loving and people reaching. There should be values that are so common amongst us. And I would say really there are three things. They're kind of, we're passionate about the Word of God, we're passionate about worshiping God, and we're passionate about witnessing to people who don't yet know God. Those are our values that drive us. Like, those things are capital C values that we are passionate about. They're priority. But then I believe every local church has a unique fingerprint. Every local church has a unique purpose, a unique mandate. And we've got 5 of our own values. And even though today the title was the things we value, you're going to have to come back next week to find out what they are. Just because we're out of time, and that's a good place to leave. But let's stand to our feet this morning. It's good to be in the house of the Lord together, isn't it? One person says amen to that. The rest of you are like, is it? Yeah, let's go. Come on, band, come on down. We appreciate you. We know that life can be challenging. We know that it feels like there's never enough time to do the things we want to do. We know that it always feels like pennies are being pinched and it's hard to kind of just survive. And we appreciate all of the energy and effort you pour into this house. We really, really do. But let me tell you, this is the Lord's house. It's not my house. It's the Lord's house. But I just want to encourage you today that as you think maybe on some of the high-level teaching I've done around values this morning, that this week you would just spend a moment thinking about how can I give my life more fully to Christ, that his will be done in my life. And because his will is being done in my life, I'm seeing his will play out in other lives also. How can I surrender more of my heart to him?